Well, howdy there, all you wonderful shoppers. Welcome back to VGMporium, video game music and more. And today we are going to have a focus on the more part. What kind of more? Mods. More mods. But not the kind of mod that adds a Randy Savage dragon that flies around and tries to attack you while you ride around on Thomas the Tank Engine. No, I'm referring to modules. A little tiny data nugget of musical information. It is actually the very first musical module format. Before there was .it, .s3m, .xm, what have you, there was .mod. And it got its start on the Amiga. And I would try to explain as to how it happened, but I just can't really do it. But there is a video out there on YouTube called Trackers, The Sound of 16-Bit by Ahoy. And he goes into like the beginnings of like the 16-bit computing eras, talks about like the early Amiga music software, and then the eventual like creation of the trackers by like, somebody who just wanted to create a program that he could easily make music with, and thus birthing the mod format. And then he talks about the evolution of the software to where it became real, better. Eventually you got Octamed, and then just all these other tracking programs. I'm gonna link it in the show notes, and I would really recommend you go check it out because he did a really awesome job on it. So enough of my gabbing. Let me tell you a bit about this track that we came in on. This was Absolute Camel by Torben Hansen, aka Metal or Bonsai PC, and this was released under the demo group Vibrance. Now with this track, it's probably pretty obvious that there's 4 tracks going on, all stereo panned. Yeah, this one just has like that really nice, like groovy, funky bass line. The percussion is really nice and snappy. Like the pads in the background are just so chill, and that lead just kind of going all over the place. That's all due to Torben Hansen, aka Metal. He got started creating music back in 1987, when I was born, on the Commodore 64, and then eventually moving on to the Amiga and then the PC, all part of the demo scene. But he also creates music outside of the demo scene under the name Two Legs, and he does a lot of like deep house, garage, soulful house. And he was actually one of the artists that contributed to Soundshock FM Funk Madness back in 2011, which I did that feature way back in episode 8. So if you want to hear some really crazy FM funk, I would suggest you go check that out. Oh, and before we move on, one of the things that a lot of demo sceners did was they would enter text in where like the instrument names would be. So what he wrote in this is partly a conversion of an old tune which I did together with Thomas Drax Mogensen, Vibrance, for the game Lollipop. Played this tune with Fairplay on a Gus for the best result. Fairplay is a module player made by Jens Christian Huss of Vibrance. Enjoy Lollipop! That one's pretty tame compared to some others I've read. They get pretty wild with those text things. So now with that, let's move on to our next track. This is Schktaaaaah by Azazel. You just heard Schktaaaaah, made by Azazel back in 1996. You just gotta love those really solid breaks, the vocal samples going on in there, like that. Just has a solidly ridiculous energy about it. Gotta love it. So now Azazel, as far as I could tell, has been involved with the demo scene since 1995 and has been making stuff, you know, even now, I think. Like I said, I haven't really been able to find much. Because honestly, the first thing that comes up when I look up Azazel demo scene is Azazel scene from Supernatural, which I never watched, didn't really care for it. But what I did find was some information on exotica.org, which is a pretty big, like, Amiga-centric site. And yeah, it says here he's been active since 1995, 98, part of the Black Lotus, helping to create things like utility discs, disc magazines, and of course, demos. Yes, so now the flavor text from his module. It says, "Yeah, out there tune by Azazel, out there. Yeah, man. Yeah, get the bong, man. Smoky samples. Me lizard man, Cho, the JV80 out there, the D20, and Celsius man. Thanks. I give so many hollahs to the eternal snow and yoke. Can't beat you guys. You simply rule. I go. There you go. 8Q. Just sheer ridiculousness." This next one takes itself a little more seriously. It's Spell-amoleriation by Uncle Tom of Razor. That epic was Spell-amoleriation by Uncle Tom of Razor. And though it may not be as crisp sounding as Absolute Camel or pushing those 4 channels as much as Schktaaaaah, it pretty much makes up for that by being like 4 or 5 songs in one track, which I believe is kind of one of the strengths of the mod format, which is like you just have those 4 tracks to go with, so you can't really like, go all over the place, having all these different things going on with multiple tracks. So you can focus in on like, what you're making, like, the melodies, the progression. If you want to make like a giant like 10-minute epic, just go for it. You're not, by 8, 16, 32, even 64 like different tracks going on at once, even though there's people who are able to do that, and I can't fathom how. And yeah, this track just ends up sounding, pretty epic and big even with those 4 channel limitations on it. And that is in small part thanks to the stereo panning that's going on. Even though it is hard panning, it's still, used pretty effectively. Now, Uncle Tom, real name Thomas Dahlgren of Sweden, also known as Titan. He's been active since about 1988, all the way up to, as far as I can tell, 2012. And he's been involved with a few different demo groups, Scoop X, Razor 1911, and North Star. And from the few sites I've found his stuff on, he's primarily been making music on the Amiga through like the mod format for demos. So now, what is the flavor text on his module read? It says, music composed in 1989 by Uncle Tom of Razor. This is the finished version of S.A. The one which was used in SAE Mega Demo wasn't really finished. Enjoy the song, but music grippers should better stay away from this product. It's for Razor use only. For no matter what year it is, there's always people out there that will rip the music, either be a tracker module or MIDI. They'll load it up in the software of their choice, add in new samples or instruments, kind of replacing the ones that are already there, maybe making some slight changes, and then slapping it out there in the world saying I created this, I did this, haha, aren't I great? Those sneaky, cheeky little dookie bugs. And actually, this is the perfect segue into our next track, which has a lot of controversy around it that is of a much more egregious form of plagiarism. And I'll tell you all about it after we listen to it. So this is Acidjazzed Evening by Tempest. awesomely funky tune you just listened to was Acidjazzed Evening by Tempest. And probably the first thing you would say is that sounds like more like a SID tune on the Commodore 64, and you would be half right. For Tempest, real name Janne Suni, sampled sounds from the Commodore 64, and it's pretty much kind of said in his little flavor text here, composed by Tempest, ASM 2K old school music, inspiration from C64 Elites, thanks. And after all the thanks and greets he gives, it says that this was made in 2000. So I'd imagine at this time, he was making this on the PC and probably had a sample bank of just a bunch of sounds made from the SID chip. So he probably decided to do it as that .mod format because it was the closest he could get to being like a Commodore 64's like 3 channels. Or even the AHX format, which was made using Abyss's highest experience, which was a tracker on the Amiga that emulated the SID chip, but gave it 4 channels. But now, as I said earlier, let's get into why there's a controversy around this track. So in 2006, Timbaland produced a track for Nelly Furtado, and the song was called Do It. And it started out like, how most pop songs start out, like a nice drum beat and some, synths going on in the background. And as soon as the main part of the song starts playing, there's this kind of strange arping sound that's pretty prominent. It's like, not in the background, it's like right there. And then later on in the song, there's actually a melody playing along with it, but it's kind of covered up by another synth line that was done by Timbaland to kind of possibly cover it up. So in 2007, there was a group on the internet that caught this and were like, whoa, hey, this sounds familiar. So they kind of checked it out, and it turned out that it sounded exactly like a Commodore 64 cover by GRG of this track, Acidjazzed Evening. And so somebody brought it up to Janne Suni's attention, and then of course there was some litigation that happened, and I think the ruling was basically that whatever you put on the internet isn't there's no instant copyright and all this weird stuff about US copyright versus international copyrights, and it's just this huge just gobbledygook of weirdness. But yeah, Timbaland basically used the song as a backing track in his own song without actually chopping it up or doing weird edits and stuff to make it just sample it. He actually just used the whole song basically. And remember kids, that's totally lame-o. But then again, that shows just how great this track is, that somebody like Timbaland would want to use it in his own track, albeit in a not so great way. If you want to hear it for yourself, just go look on YouTube, Acidjazzed Evening Timbaland, and you'll find, a bunch of videos just kind of doing the comparisons and stuff, so yeah. So now I think we'll end this episode off with one of my favorite current demo sceners, though I'm not quite sure if he's making the music for demos or if he's just making it because he just enjoys making it. We got Altenef Heading by Vim, with an exclamation point. final track, Altenaf Heading by Vim. And yes, he is one of my favorite active tracker musicians. And I actually discovered him back in like 2007 through his album called A Random Collection of Consonants that was released back in 2003. And he's got such a great range of styles in it. It's like kind of like, breakbeat stuff like this, really crazy drum and bass stuff, really ambient. It all like fits together for an OST for a game that doesn't exist. It's one of my favorite go-tos. So yes, Vim, real name Keith Bayless. He's been making music since the 90s, mostly kind of like electronic chip style music, using like starting off with the Amiga and then moving on to the PC, just always using trackers. And he doesn't limit himself to just one tracker. He uses all different ones like Fast Tracker 2, Impulse Tracker, Pro Tracker, Just Cola Buzz. And he's still actively posting stuff on SoundCloud. I think the last track he did was like 4 months ago, and it's really dang good. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this journey through mod music. Even though it's pretty limited with the 4 channels, like as long as you know what you're doing, you can get a lot out of it. Make it sound like there's even more going on than just those 4. And sure, these may not have been the most limit-pushing tracks, but they're some of my favorites. So yeah, it's my show. I can play what I want. And speaking of playing what I want, next episode's gonna be my entry into the Masters of VGM series that's going on with the other VGM podcasters throughout the month of June. And I'm gonna be featuring my favorites, and also they're kind of those that I feel need a little bit more attention. And I could probably honestly say that I'm gonna be maybe the least prepared as far as notes and stuff. I'm just gonna be kind of just going with it, see what happens. Gonna be a good time. I kind of can't help it. It's like just that improvisational spirit in me from hosting an open mic for nearly 10 years. So now, where can you find me? Well, you can find VGMporium on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and then of course you can listen to the show on all your favorite podcatchers: Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible even. So I've been your host, Rage Cage, and I'm looking forward to all the craziness that's gonna be going on this month.